ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. This is Mr. Quality Games here, and I've got some really cool stuff about the new Zombies map in the Uprising DLC for Black Ops 2. The new map is called Mob of the Dead. Now, there are 4 multiplayer maps coming out in Uprising, and we're also seeing Mob of the Dead, which we'll be covering. We won't touch on the multiplayer maps, although there is some cool stuff about them. We're not going to be covering that because I think Mob of the Dead is going to be way cooler, and I've got some reasons for that. But let's move on to the setting. Mob of the Dead will be taking place in Alcatraz. It will be set in the 1920s to 1930s Prohibition era, which means that we'll be seeing some Prohibition era guns. Hopefully, I'd like to see a bit of diversity in the weaponry, such as the Tommy gun, which was featured in the trailer. M1 Thompson submachine gun used in the Prohibition era, used by a lot of crime lords, and it was pretty much the machine gun of that era. Now, I'd like to point out there are 4 new characters in this, and it shares a lot. This map in itself shares a lot of similarities to a different map, but I'll get to that later. The 4 characters are Ray Liotta, Chaz Palminteri, Michael Madsen, and Joe Pantoliano. Now, I'm not going to go through each character's bio, basically to give you a summary of all of them. They're all actors, they're all American actors, and they all played in a movie that had to do with the Prohibition era crime, like gangs and mob bosses, such as Sopranos, Godfather, those sorts of movies. They all played a role in one of those movies. Now, it seems fitting because it is Alcatraz, and Alcatraz housed Al Capone, Alphonse Gabriel Al Capone. He was held in Alcatraz, so it'd be kind of make sense. It was functional at that time. It seems fitting. Um, but I'd like to point out that I was thinking about these characters, right? They're all 4 actors. Well, what previous map in Black Ops 1 has all 4 characters as being actors? Call of the Dead ring a bell? This map, Mob of the Dead, shares a lot of similarities to Call of the Dead. The biggest one being is their names. Mob of the Dead, Call of the Dead. The majority of their names is the same. So that got me inclined to think, well, let's compare and contrast the two just to see what we come up with. And I've done that. I've created a Venn diagram here in front of me, comparing Call of the Dead and Mob of the Dead. So go over the differences first, because there's not a lot of them. Call of the Dead, it's stationed in Russian Siberia, which is a lot different than Alcatraz off the coast of California, and it's more of an open environment. There's a lot of sniping positions. They made the scavenger just for that map because it's so open. Now, Mob of the Dead, on the other hand, is stationed in Alcatraz, nowhere near Russia. It appears to be a very closed environment. There seems to be a lot of fighting going on within the prison itself and not on the outside. So that kind of inclines me to think that this isn't going to be very open. We're seeing a lot of shotgun and submachine gun action. Now, to go over the similarities, although I know that there are different differences I haven't covered, but those are pretty minor. Moving on to the similarities here, both Call of the Dead and Mob of the Dead both have 4 random characters that have practically nothing to do with the storyline. And they are all actors. That's the biggest thing that got me to think there. Now, these characters, Joe, Ches, Michael, and Ray, don't seem to have any connection with Misty or any of the other characters that are in Transit or Green Run. Now, it was kind of the same way with the 4 characters of Call of the Dead. They didn't really seem to have much to do with Richtofen, Takeo, Nikolai, or Tank. Didn't really seem to have a lot of connection, but they did play it in the storyline, but they didn't really have that much of a connection besides they fixed the time machine for them to get them on their way. Now, moving on, both maps are film-oriented. As I said, all 4 characters in both maps are actors, and Call of the Dead was a whole, it was all about film. It was all about, making a movie over Element 115. And truthfully, Mob of the Dead could be the same thing. I mean, there's no way to determine until we actually play it, but I have an inclination here that it will be similar. Now I'd like to move on to a very interesting topic that I think will be prevalent in both of these, and is that Call of the Dead and Mob of the Dead both appear to have a boss zombie. Now, Call of the Dead obviously had George Romero, but Mob of the Dead, in the beginning of the trailer, when it mentions Mob of the Dead, and I'll show a still here, it shows a zombie in a suit. His eyes are glowing red, and he's got an insignia on his suit. Now, he appears to be very different than the other zombies that we've seen before, so I'm going to guess that he's a boss zombie. And if he was a boss zombie, then I would guess that his name is going to be the Warden. Seeing as how, this it's a prison and it's a boss zombie. Boss of a prison's obviously the Warden. So that makes me think that these two maps are very closely related, because if Mob of the Dead actually ended up having a Warden as a boss zombie, these two maps would be the only two maps with a very formidable boss zombie. Now, I say formidable because the Inferno zombie and Screamer zombie and Shangri-La weren't very formidable, and the Lightning zombie in Transit Green Run wasn't very formidable. You could kill him with 2 hits with the shock pads. Can't think of the name of them off the top of my head, but that's not it's not of importance. Excuse me. So basically, Call of the Dead and Mob of the Dead both share the boss zombie, and they are the second DLC to be released. Now, I don't know if that has a lot to do with it, but Call of the Dead was the second DLC released for Black Ops 1, and Mob of the Dead is the second DLC released for Black Ops 2. Now, I'd like to bring up something, is that the Easter egg for Call of the Dead was, the original characters were trapped. And I think that Mob of the Dead could have a situation where the original characters could be trapped. Now, you think, well, it's a prison. Well, what if there's a cell somewhere off, perhaps in the isolation wing? A cell that's completely blocked off, and it's the same situation as a Call of the Dead. I think we might be onto something here, because it's very likely that the Easter egg would be, having to do with the prison cell. I think that's going to be something cool, is because with the aspect of all the prison cells, you could have different situations where you need to get a gun, and the zombies bomb rush you, you get down, your friends have to run into the cell, to revive you, you all die. So I think the cells are going to play importance, and I think they're going to even play a more importance than just normal gameplay. I think the Easter egg is going to be held within these cells, but I have no true evidence stating that's going to happen. That's just a theory. Now, those are the similarities between Call of the Dead and Mob of the Dead. Hopefully, Mob of the Dead brings a new wonder weapon, but let's move on to more of Mob of the Dead. The Jason Blundell, the executive producer, said, "We wanted to take the story somewhere new." Obviously, he has done that with Alcatraz, but he also said that he wanted to change the vibe. Now, he said, thriller horror, and I think this is a good turn for zombies. Truthfully, I've been getting kind of tired of the old adventure-style zombies. Truthfully, Die Rise really kind of rubbed off on me. I didn't find a lot of entertainment from that. So I can tell you that I will be very pleased if this is very horror oriented, because I think it goes back to the roots of zombies, back in Frucht and Shinonuma even, for that matter. Derice really kind of got away from that, but Nocturne Toten, the first time you ever played Nocturne Toten and you actually, played it, and you're like, holy crap, what is going on? I'm freaked out. That's what I like to see, from the Zombies development team. So I went over the fact that, there's going to be a Tommy gun. I mean, hopefully I did. But basically, we're seeing some Prohibition-era guns, such as the Tommy gun. We could be seeing some World at War guns, possibly. I mean, there's a bit of a time gap between the 30s and 1940s. but they're the guns of that time. You know, they were still kind of in service for a few decades. So we could be seeing some World at War guns in there. They might be trying to implement that. But I'd like to say that there's only one scene in this whole trailer that the characters actually wield a Prohibition-era gun, and that's the Tommy gun. Every single other time, they either wield an LSAT, an Executioner, or some other modern gun from Black Ops 2. So that kind of brings me to the decision of whether this is taking place in the actual time frame of 1920 to 1930, or this is actually modern times and the actors are actually, visiting back. Or perhaps the actors were making a movie while it, you know, outbroke. But basically, I've gotten between the two ideas that it's actually the 1930s and or 1920s to 1930s, and the actors are actually, playing their role in real life. Something like that, and or it could be the modern times. Now, if it was actually in the 1920s to 30s, we'd be seeing more 20s guns, the Prohibition eras, and it would be more authentic. But if it was actually the modern times, we'd be seeing more modern guns and be less authentic. I'd rather see the time jump to 1920 to 1930. I'd like to see if that would happen, but that might be kind of complicated to do considering the storyline. So I think it's actually in modern times here. So, moving on, I'll show the still here. There's a scene where you can actually see what looks to be a dog. Now, this could mean that dogs have their own round, kind of like the crawlers did in Die Rise. And the dogs did in, De Reese, such and such. I think the dogs are going to be returning, obviously, because we have seen them. Not sure if they will be incorporated into rounds or given their own round, considering how there's already a boss zombie, but that is to be foretold in the release. Now, I'd like to point something out. The ending statement from Jason Blundell, he said, "These characters make this Mob of the Dead." Now, a bit of controversy there, because he could be saying these characters actually make this what it is. It's like, if you didn't have these characters, it wouldn't be Mob of the Dead. Or he could be saying these characters literally make up this Mob of the Dead. Like, they make up a mob of the dead. I'm probably just going off on a whim here and this doesn't matter, but I like to bring light to that controversy. So, thank you very much for watching. If I missed on anything, please say in the comment, like that button, and subscribe for more stuff. I know I have been slacking like crap. I've got golf, I've got some serious school stuff going on right now, but I will be continuing all of my series once I have the chance to. Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you guys watching this. I hope my predictions have come true, and it's a lot like Call of the Dead. Mob of the Dead really could be a hit or a miss. It all depends on how the development team plays it out. So thank you very much, guys, for watching, and I will talk to you in the next video. See ya, guys.